What's going on, guys? Back at you guys with another presentation. Um, I want to talk to you guys real quick about looking at the world from a logical point of view. See, a lot of people in this world don't look at the world from a logical point of view. See, I look at life from a logical point of view. I look at things from a realistic standpoint. And that's the way you have to look at life. You have to look at the world from a realistic point of view. You know, a lot of people don't look at things from a realistic point of view. See, Christianity teaches you not to look at things from a realistic point of view. That's why I'm no longer a Christian. Because you have to look at life from a realistic point of view. You got to look at things for what they are in this thing called life. You know, you got to look at things for what they are. You know, you got a lot of people that don't like looking at reality from a logical point of view. But see, that's the problem with humanity. That's the problem with people, and that's the problem with mankind. I've gotten to a point in my life to where, you know, at this point in my life, at this phase in my life, I question everything in life. You know, I'm not just believing what I was taught anymore. See, a lot of people, they're programmed, you know, to believe what they were taught or how they were raised. But once you become an adult, you have a mind of your own. You got a brain, use it. You know, just because you were taught certain things as a kid, just because you was raised a certain way, just because you were instilled certain values, it doesn't mean that you cannot use your brain and think outside the box. See, I think outside the box. And I know that a lot of the things that I was taught growing up, you know, a lot of the things that a lot of people was taught was wrong. We was fed the wrong information. I'm going to just leave it at that. We were fed the wrong information just about life. Being raised Christian feeds you the wrong information about life. You know, see, when people don't want to look at reality for what it is, because your life is a movie, and every scene in that movie tells you who you are as a person. So if you've had a lot of negativity in your life, then that tells you who you are as a person. Your experiences in every scene that's in your life is like a movie, and every scene in that movie determines who you are as a person. So if most of the scenes in your life are negative, then that tells you who you are. You're an unfortunate person. You know, you're not one of God's chosen people. I just look at things from a logical standpoint. Like, I put myself in the place of the Almighty Creator. If I was God, savvy guy, if I was God, every dude would be able to bang a woman with a fat behind. Bang it like a big bass drum. If I was God, everybody would be rich. Everybody will be riding in foreign cars. Everybody will have refrigerators full of champagne. Everybody will be living high off the hog. And sometimes I wonder about hell. If hell is a real place, I hope they got some fat booty bras down there. I hope they got bottles of champagne. I hope they got some Amenagil Dozenia. You know, I hope they got some loud music down there. I hope it's a party and a celebration and a fiesta every day. You know, because sometimes I wonder about hell. Because, you know, when you're raised in the church, you're indoctrinated with these beliefs. So I'm hoping that if hell is real, it's going to be a party down there. And we going to all be in unison, having a good time together. But I just believe in looking at things from a logical standpoint. You know, looking at things from a realistic point of view. Because you have to look at things from a logical standpoint. My daddy always told me, you have to use your brain. What makes sense to you? If it don't make sense, then it's probably some nonsense. It's probably something you shouldn't be entertaining. And that is why I'm no longer Christian anymore, because I've gotten to the point where I follow William Jones' philosophy. You have to turn your brains on and think. Use logic and reason. I want to give a shout out to William Jones, you know, because he once was a Christian, but he backed away from that foolishness because he started using common sense. And I felt this would be a good presentation to make today, looking at the world from a logical point of view. You have to question things in life. Like, I see certain presentations here online where people talk about breaking away from negative thoughts. The cure for negative thoughts is having a good life. You got to have a good life in order to be positive. See, people who are upbeat, people who are positive, people who are in good spirits, these are people who've had a lot of success in their life. These are people that God favors. These are the people who got a lot of good things going for them in life. See, everybody don't have a great life. Some people got a bad, jacked up life. They got a effed up life, you know. See, I believe in the power of reality. See, reality is something that you can't deny. You have to take a step back and you got to look at your life, you know, and that's something that a lot of people are not man or woman enough to do. They don't want to look at their life. And that's the problem with mankind, and that's the problem with this society that we live in. You got a lot of people in this world who don't think logical, and they don't look at things from a realistic point of view. That's why I try to put myself in the place of God. You know, what would I do if I was God? What makes sense to me? See, it's all about what makes sense to you. That's how you got to look at this world. That's why I always tell myself, what would I do if I was God? Everybody will be rich. Every dude will be banging fat booty bras, be popping bottles of champagne, getting blowjobs on beaches, living good. That'll be the life. That is the good life. You know, see, if I was a preacher, I'd love to get up in the pulpit in the church, because I'm not going to preach from the Bible. I'm going to preach my philosophy on life. You know, I wouldn't even need a Bible to preach a sermon in a church. I'll just get up there and give my philosophy. I'll give a common sense philosophy. Because, see, common sense is not something that a lot of people have anyway. So if I was a preacher, I'll say, you know what, congregation? The sermon today is going to be on logical thinking. I'll be up there in my suit with my Rolex on. Yeah. That's going to be the sermon for the day, logical thinking. What makes sense? Yeah. And this sermon here ain't coming from the Bible either. See, that's something that a lot of people have backed away from. A lot of people have backed away from thinking logical. You know, this is something that a lot of people have backed away from. Just the ability to think logical and, using common sense, the ability to reason. A lot of people have definitely, they've got out of this. And people need to get back into using common sense and using logic and using God-given wisdom. That's what people need to get back into. And if I was a preacher, I'd be preaching that real, And to anyone who's watching this presentation right now, I just want to tell you guys, the power to get rid of any negative thought that you have is a good life. That is the antidote to getting rid of any negative thought that you may have, a good life. You can't have a positive mindset without having the credentials to back it up. You can't have a positive mindset without a positive life. And that's what I want you guys to understand. You got to have a positive life. You got to have the experiences that would make you a positive individual, if you know what I mean. Without the experiences, that would make you a positive individual, then you're not going to be a positive person. And that's pretty much what I want you guys to know. Logical thinking is something that's not so logical nowadays. But I just want you guys to just know, anything in your life, question it. Question anything in your life. Question the things that you were taught when you was a kid. Question every aspect of your life. That's what I want you guys to do. Don't just hold on to something because you was taught that when you was a kid. Question everything in your life, because the things that you were taught as a child doesn't mean that it was right. Like I stated, I was raised Christian, but I backed away from it because I've gotten to a point where at 35 years old, I'm using logic. You have to use logic. Look at the world from a logical standpoint. You guys have a great day. Talk to you soon.